1. The Prisoner. In the depths of the prison of elders, Eramis is the Kell of no house. Outside, she is the firebrand of House Devils, the archfiend of the Twilight Gap, the Shipstealer. But here, she has no house. Here, she reigns all on her own. In the arena where XIII runts and leaderless Cabal challenge her, she rules with a broken arc spear for her scepter. It is the strongest weapon they'll give her, and she bends it to her will. No matter how many times the Etherfat guards try to send her to her death in that arena, she triumphs. She kills their champions, watches the ether hiss from their masks, watches the gel leak out of their suits. She begins to cherish the smell of a good fight. Blood, sweat, ether, fear. House of Anarchy, House of Riot, House of Eramis, House of Nothing. When there is only one Kell, there is no need for houses. Today she fights a centurion of the Broken Red Legion. Money changes hands. His pauldrons are scuffed with the memory of battle, and he's been given a warhammer. He raises it to cheers and peacocks for the crowd. Eramis tosses her broken spear between her hands, waiting. Two glowing, pinpoint eyes focus on her as the centurion turns. He swings the hammer at her, and she rolls out of the way. He swings it again, but she's behind him now, and out of his sight line. Like a creature searching for a fly on its back, he struggles to find her. She jams the sparking head of her arc spear into a notch in his armor, and uses the leverage to vault herself onto his shoulder. He rages like a Nursai beast, all fury and stupidity, and nearly throws her from his shoulders. She tries to pull her spear free, but his giant hand knocks her senseless for a moment. The spear releases at the last minute. She grabs the top. Arc energy bites her palm as she jams the tip of the blade under the edge of his helmet and into his neck. He screams. Before he falls, she leaps off and lands on her feet. The crowd never cheers for her. Instead, they whisper. No prison will hold Eramiskel, they say. Eramiskel is a devil greater than the devils themselves. Eramiskel does not know how to lose. 2. The Wolf. The neighboring cell holds a wolf. She ignores him at first. He's too greedy for her acknowledgement. Sometimes he reminds her of the needy dregs that followed her old Kell like carrion birds, squawking for attention and squabbling over his kills. What the XIII have lost more than anything else is dignity. Eventually, the wolf learns to intrigue her. He calls himself Praxis, and he has ideas. But he's young. He thinks every idea he conceives of is the first and the best of its kind. She suspects he's never had to report directly to a Kell. He likes to talk about machines, building them and bending them to his will. He has a mad idea about recapturing the great machine, binding it in arc wire and making it give them its power. He's been listening to the stories about Gaul. She lets him talk, and she asks him questions. Every question is a whetstone. Every conversation is a test, and it will only take one failure to lose her interest.
The great machine made the XIII great,
she says,
until it left us. When it did, we were weaker than when it arrived. Why do you seek its touch again? To return us to that strength,
he says. His voice is muffled through the wall between them, but the arrogance comes through clear.
How can you build strength on a foundation of weakness?
She asks. Each word is a needle. Each word should sting him with revelation. He remains silent.
Did the great machine make XIII strong, or did it draw out the strength within us?
She asks. Again, silence. She tilts her head back, looking at the dark ceiling of her cell.
Reliance is the greatest weakness. Remember that. You are playing with a child stacking spheres.
He's silent so long that she begins to wonder if he was worth her time. Then, he says,
I will create new spheres.
She closes her eyes and smiles. 3. The Traitor. On the day of the prison break, Eramis is nursing a gut wound. It's not fatal, or at least she doesn't think so. She won the match in the arena, but not before an arrogant captain drove a sword into her side. It cut through her devil robes and left a bloom of blood that reminds her of the water flowers on Reese. Athris loved water flowers. She's dozing when VIII arrives at her cell.
Eramis.
She opens her eyes and then narrows them immediately. Despite the wound, she stands, too quick. She gets dizzy, and then steps towards the cell door.
Traitor,
she says in greeting. VIII flinches. He shakes his head, lowers his eyes. Even with the door between them, she can see his fear. It buoys her.
There is change to come,
he says quietly in XIII, and then looks over his shoulder. His eyes dart back and forth, fearful, suspicious. He switches suddenly to the clumsy common language of the Guardians.
Change VIII will make, yes? Change VIII will lead, but VIII too will need a leader.
Eramis laughs.
You wish to make me your prisoner, Kell? No.
VIII cringes.
VIII wishes. I do not care what you wish, VIII the loyal.
She says, there are XIII who change in the shadow of prison bars. They fall, they shrink. But Eramis has grown. She must show VIII that even with this steel between them, he is smaller. He is still a dreg pretending to be a vandal.
If there is justice in this world, one day I will dock your last 2 arms and leave you for the dead.
Something in VIII's eyes harden. They share a tense silence. Finally, he says, in a voice as cold as ether,
do not say that VIII did not try to help.
He leaves, and Eramis settles herself again on the floor of her cell. Later that day, an alarm sounds. The warden projects a message in VIII's voice. The doors of her cell open, unprompted, as frenzied XIII and Cabal charge through the prison, thirsting for freedom. 4. The Visionary. In the first several months of her freedom, Eramis curses Misrax, the Forsaken. He is a wish to be Kell, a captured traitor, a 4-armed dreg cringing before a false queen, playing pretend among the enemies of the XIII. And worst of all, the most humiliating, he has beaten Eramis. She has failed to acquire the Siva weapon, failed to shame the Guardians, failed to reignite the fires of the House of Devils. Her failure haunts her. Now she sits in the bridge of her stolen catch, straight-spined, staring at some distant point that she has long passed, one she can never return to. Atrax, youngest of her council, watches her from across the room. She closes the gap between them.
My Kell,
she says. She has a voice like a child. Eramis is quiet for a beat longer than she needs to be. Finally, she says,
you are too young to remember the old house, what the devils were before.
Atrax bows her head out of respect.
This failure has no sting for you.
Eramis bites, bitter. Atrax keeps her head bowed. Then, slowly, she raises it. Her eyes dart over Eramis's face, searching.
I am too young to remember.
She agrees.
But my eyes are clear. I can see what the devils will be.
Eramis opens her mouth to remind Atrax of her place, and then pauses. Something in her mind has unlocked. She stands to her full, towering height, stretches her second set of arms.
No,
she says. Clarity has descended on her like a Reese rain shower.
The devils are nothing.
She begins to walk out of the room, purpose in her step, fire reignited in her belly.
The devils are dead.
House of Anarchy, House of Ruin, House of Eramis.
We must become something new.
5. The Nightmare. As she dissolves the old bonds of the House of Devils, Eramis is haunted by shadowed dreams. In one, she relives Twilight Gap. She lunges, driving a sword into the belly of a Guardian soldier, grunting as they yell and crumple forward. Another Guardian rushes at her, head on, before she has time to yank the sword free, but she hears the sound of a shock rifle firing behind her, and leans abruptly to the right as the shot flies by and hits the Guardian before her with full force. She looks back to see Priestess shimmering with the purple glow of the void as her servitor shields her. Priestess tips her head in acknowledgement of Eramis and turns the rifle to fire into another cluster of Guardians. Eramis rips her sword free and forges ahead. They are closing in on the city now. Guardians are falling all around her. They are so close. Fast, heavy footfalls come up behind her. Phylax, ferocious and bloodthirsty, shouts to Eramis as she attacks a towering, broad-shouldered Guardian. Eramis ducks and slides out of the way. As Phylax makes contact with the Guardian's head, Eramis slashes the beast across his side with her sword. He loses his balance, and she kicks his hip, tipping him towards Phylax. In these days, Phylax almost always fights with her bare hands. She breaks his neck. Eramis pushes forward. They are so close. A ferocious laugh erupts to her right, and then the thundering blast of a scorch cannon. Tanix, a blur of whirring machinery, creates explosions of earth and flesh and blood all around them. He keeps laughing. So close. But then, before her, a blinding flash of gold. She sees Elixni burst into flames and ash around her as a gun fires one shot after another. Pools of shining light are the only trace of the victims. The Guardian wielding the gun is like a tiny sun. Another shot. Priestess' servitor. Another. Priestess herself. Eramis remembers losing, but she does not remember this. Doesn't remember seeing Phylax evaporate into blowing ash. Doesn't remember the shot that hits her in the chest, or the burning fire that explodes through her limbs, or her own scream. She wakes with a jolt, breathless. 6. The Herald. The dreams persist. They are old memories, but twisted. Battling a Guardian in the prison of elders and falling before their light. Athris banging on the walls of her sleeping pod, calling for the great machine. She can't sleep. Something in the dreams tells her to travel to Earth's moon, and she follows the sign. On the moon, she fights through corpse-stinking hive like swarms of flies. Their fetid stench is unbearable, worse than the carcass piles at the prison, worse than the battlefield of Twilight Gap. They eat and breathe death, and she resents their breath upon her, so she cuts through them like so much tall grass. A night stalks her deep into the catacombs, staying on the edge of her hearing, matching her footsteps. She lets it make the first strike, and when it does, she cracks its exoskeleton armor with her sword. The thrill of the fight, hearing the night howl as it meets its death, is almost comforting, a reprieve from her unsettling dreams. She's painted with hive blood as she continues her advance, and when she finally comes upon the ship, a familiar sight causes her to freeze in her tracks. She remembers this fleet. She remembers seeing them in the sky like black arrows. She remembers the space where the great machine was, and then the blank space where it wasn't. It was all a lesson in dependence, one that took many years to learn. This time, the black arrow speaks to her. She knows it's not Elixni. It's not one of the clumsy tongues of Earth, nor the lilting speech of the reef. It is something else, a whisper, but one that is so loud and somehow understood so perfectly.
Stop waiting,
it says.
No one is coming for you. You must be your own salvation.
She feels something in all four of her hands. A tingle, a buzz. It reminds her of the broken arc spear. She clenches and unclenches her fists, staring at the sleek surface of the ship. There's power here, power that she can grasp, but not yet. A waking dream strikes her like lightning. She's transported. The bleak gray dust of the moon falls away, and she stands in a white plain of whipping ice and snow. It blinds her, chases her breath away. Then she is on the moon again, and the whispers are silent. She knows where she must go next. 7. The Scribe. Eramis and Varix stand in the shadow of a half-constructed city. Her people have salvaged bits and pieces from the XIII hideouts across the system and lashed them to the ruins of a Golden Age facility, building something new from something old. It's XIII flesh on the bones of humanity's failure, nestled in the icy tundra of Europa. She watches Varix's face as he looks up. There is something familiar there, an awe that she remembers from a long time ago.
It will be a new Reese,
she says, raising her eyes to the scaffolding before them.
A new home for our people. No more running. No more living on the outskirts.
Varix looks away finally to meet Eramis's eyes.
What of the devils?
He speaks XIII. It surprises her.
Old names,
she says, dismissive.
Leave the old names and the old ways in the past.
Just as she remembers, Varix doesn't let his awe stand in the way of practicality. His gaze is turned appraising.
And why choose this place? Why choose this frozen moon? I saw it in a dream.
She can feel his skepticism. She doesn't blame him, actually. Since the prison break, he's been hiding somewhere, some forgotten corner of the system, waiting for judgment to come. He gifted his people with freedom, and then built himself a cell of isolation. He can't see beyond what he thinks he knows.
And why did you call for me?
He asks. There is a hardness in his voice.
After everything, we are not allies, Eramis. Old ways,
she says again.
If the XIII are to survive, we need to abandon all memory of division. Petty squabbles, house politics. I want to wipe it clean.
She looks up at the scaffolding again.
This will be a new world, Varix. New ideas, new stories. We will be known and remembered as something new.
Varix follows her gaze. Now his voice has softened.
And why me?
Eramis turns to face him fully now. He fears her still. She sees it in the hunch of his shoulders, the way he turns his face to the side, as if looking at her head on will hurt his eyes.
In the new world,
she says,
I will need a scribe.
VIII. The Council.
Old friend.
There's a bloody grin in Phylax's voice as she clasps Eramis's hand and pulls her close to her chest. Priestess stands behind Phylax, tall and ethereal. They're exactly as Eramis remembers them. Phylax chuckles.
I always said no prison would hold her.
Eramis laughs, easy and familiar. It's as if nothing has changed. She's transported back to her house devil days, the days of assignments in the darkest, grimmest parts of her old stomping grounds, the Cosmodrome, with no one but these two for company. They laid waste to members of encroaching houses, razed human settlements to the ground, dreamed about the day they could challenge and strike down their own Kell to take up the mantle for themselves. But Priestess looks behind Eramis, not at her, and soon Phylax does the same. Her eyes narrow. She lurches forward, past Eramis, to grab Varix up by his neck.
Traitor drag!
Phylax hisses and spits.
Cringing little!
Varix scrambles and kicks like a creature in a trap.
Phylax!
He gasps. Praxis and Atrax stand to the side, waiting to meet the veterans of the old house. They watch without concern, though Praxis looks pleased. They do not intervene. Phylax tightens her fist.
Let him go,
Eramis says. Phylax looks at Eramis, and then drops Varix. She says nothing, but Eramis can feel her disapproval. Critis's too. Doubt creeps into their minds.
His crimes are undeniable,
Eramis says, dismissive. She doesn't look at Varix, but hears his tortured breathing as he scrambles back, away from Phylax.
But he's all that remains of House Judgment. You've no special love for scribes,
Critis says skeptically. Eramis inclines her head.
No, but a scribe who can draw the ear of the reef elixni?
Phylax grunts in understanding, but still looks unimpressed. She returns to Critis's side. Critis, on the other hand, looks pleased.
Clever,
she says. Before they can question her further, Eramis changes the subject.
But I did not call you here for politics.
She gestures with one of her secondary arms.
Come, let me show you what I've built.
9. The Kell of Darkness. When the obsidian ship descends on Europa, Eramis is prepared, her council by her side. Varix, Phylax, Critis, Praxis, and Atrax. She greets its arrival with bated breath. The foreign whispers return. This time, they say,
Do not wait to be chosen. Choose for yourself. Choose salvation.
Eramis boards the ship and chooses strength. It is in this moment, as she holds this cold and ancient power in her hands, that House Salvation is born. 10. The Warrior.
I am Phylax, once warrior of House Devils, once child of home Reese. I speak now to Elixni still scattered. Listen close, there is no repeating. Death to House Devils, ashes to home Reese. I cast off these useless things and pledge my life here to Reese Reborn, to Eramis and her House Salvation. I fought many battles and found no warrior above the knife will of Eramiskel. Together we sieged the walls of the Earth City with weapons in every claw. Side by side we spilled life force across the system. No catch was out of her reach. No death could seize her. Even enchained by the wretched Reefborn, she grew only stronger in mind and body. Chelkis, Skolas, Axis, resurrect them all and watch her reduce them to dregs. Her new claimed power is beyond any they wielded, beyond any our people ever knew. And she will grant it to all who unite under her banner. Even now, as lieutenant, I share in that with her. Side by side, our bodies thrum with the same ice-cold energy. Energy to drag the great machine from the sky and fortify our new city with its metal hide. Energy to defeat the wretched of this system and feed our children with the battle bounty. Energy to reign beyond 1,000 lifetimes. All you, now here, I am Phylax, the warrior of darkness. Life to Reese Reborn. Victory to the Kell of Darkness. Glory to the House Salvation.
11. The Technocrat.
This is Praxis, the Technocrat speaking from Reese Reborn. It has become evident that, even as our numbers grow, many Elixni have yet to accept our Kell's invitation to take part in the long-awaited progress of our people. Thus, it falls on me to make an argument I did not think I would have to make. No, that is false. I did anticipate some degree of cowardice, obstinacy, stupidity, whatever you might call it. But only in the beginning, when we lacked evidence for our endeavor. At this late stage, however, when Eramiskel succeeds where all others have failed, alas, I might find it hard to believe I could not see the empty spaces in our half-filled capital, or heard the whispers of doubt sown by the weakling of House Light. Yes, even from this moon of some distance, I can tap into your transmission, Misrax. Others may call you forsaken, but I dub you foolish. Clinging still to that moon-side obsolescence, do you forget the lesson we teach our children? A catch laden with the unnecessary will never fly. As for those of you following in his example, placing your faith in peace with our enemies, well, what good are the words of a scientist if you ignore what is before your own eyes? I can only encourage you to truly think. What proofs have your alleged allies offered of their loyalty? Their willingness to share equally with you? How have you benefited, truly benefited, from them? If you answer, none yet, or I don't know, I admire your patience. For myself, for my Kell, for all of us, House Salvation, the time has grown too long, and failures too many to invest in such a flimsy experiment. The XIII must update our approach if we are ever to rise. Either join us as we march toward progress, or be swept aside with the vestigialities.
12. The Priestess.
XIII, Critis the Priestess cries out to you across the abyss. As we speak, the once Shipstealer brings the promise of our people to pass. Soon we will rise to true prominence, united under one banner and one Kell, with no gods but ourselves. For who withstood the whirlwind? Who pieced together catches and armories out of ruins and scraps? Who roamed the vast expanses for generations, subsisting on drips of ether and facing endless battle? Who survived? We did. Not the so-called great machine nor the idols we crafted in its image. The XIII survived. So why do we pine still for a light that shines not on us? Why do we kneel to the servitors that we created? Because we are afraid. Because for all that we've suffered, for how long we've traveled, we clung tight to the belief that we were meant for a higher existence, meant to evolve beyond our current forms. If only the whirlwind hadn't cut our people off from godliness too soon. This, I believe, as well. I mourned the death of our collective potential in our rituals and rites. Felt the acid burn of despair in my body as I received succor from our prime servitor. Dreamt of the day I turned my weeping eyes to the sky and found it empty of salvation. I was blind, but Eramis removed the light from my eyes, and now I see. So I entreat you, children of Reese, come receive clarity for yourselves. Witness the greatness of House Salvation and the Kell who leads it. Rejoice, for she who brought our servitors low where they belong will do the same to the great machine. The light holds nothing for us now. Long have we traveled in darkness. Now is our time to embrace it.
13. The Wildcard.
I am Atrax, the Wildcard, and I have been charged by my Kell to speak to the youth of the XIII. Those like me have never known a life that wasn't wandering, who have no memories of Reese, only tales of glorious cities under glowing green skies passed down from our elders. The very same ones who moan that we have never felt true peace, which can only be found under the shade of the great machine. Well, I, for one, am glad for it. I could not be more grateful that the whirlwind came to slice the ties before I was entangled too. They told us that it was destruction that visited that day, but what if it was salvation? They called us unlucky to have been born in the dark of deep space, but we were born free. They say we lack the light to truly see, but when we first opened our eyes, there was nothing to block our view of the vastness of the universe. So why do we let the nostalgia blind point the way? Why do we carry their dead dreams? They have turned their backs on the future. I say let them. All the easier to strike them down and finish the cleansing started long ago. Then you can join us on Reese Reborn.
14. The Scarred.
Ha! So the Kell of Winter seeks the aid of Tannix, the Scarred. How formal. Wasn't so long ago you called me self-serving scum and spat at my bannerless armor. I might have ripped each and every one of your arms from you then, and torn off your legs for good measure. But I sensed one day you'd come begging for my services. Lucky I am such a vulgar mercenary after all, eh? It works in your favor now that I hold payment above pride. Payment not just in glimmer, in blood and battle too. No one Kell, no one house has been able to slake my thirst. No one job either. Though a breakout of the prison of elders might come close. But for XIII, you ask me to pass over far greater warriors for that impotent Archon? You think he will serve you better than Picus, the Disavowed? Than Pyrrhisis, the Palace Bane? Than Kalzar, the Drekthas? You'd choose XIII over the Shipstealer, Eramis, who led the charge at the final attempt, who hurled herself at the wretched light-bearers who moved so quickly. I would have sworn she had 8 arms. When your pathetic winter ones followed in her footsteps, they had to wade through the flood of life force she left in her wake. And still you wonder why I refuse my house pledge. You could conquer the system, but you'd rather adhere to these arbitrary customs. XIII belongs to Winter, and Eramis does not. Twice my usual price. The fee is for my restraint. It will take what little I have to free XIII over the fiercest of XIII fighters.
Hey guys, thank y'all so much again for watching my latest labor of love. I know I say this basically every time, but I had a lot of fun making this video. Mainly for 2 reasons. First, I was able to find authentic Destiny sound effects, which I think made this turn out a lot better in my opinion. And also, I took all of this environmental footage myself, which I don't know if y'all have noticed this, but this game is really fucking pretty. Yeah. Speaking of environmental footage, in my last video, I used some from YouTuber Ultraclocked. So I wanted to thank him for that because he does some really awesome stuff on his channel, and he's just a really nice guy beside. We may be doing something in the future if I ever get around to doing the Emolent lore books. But you may be wondering, David, why does this video look so much better? Where did you get the green screen? Well, I'll tell you. Thank you for asking. I got it from my patrons, my wonderful, wonderful patrons. Thank you guys so much. I was able to take their donations and reinvest it into my channel, so I got a green screen and some nice softbox lights. If you would like to help support me on Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/meramorphic. It's down in the description. I have special things for my patrons, such as like audio-only lore readings that you can download, and so you can listen to them whenever you want, and some other cool things if you want to join. And yeah, that's basically it. I've already rambled long enough, so until next time, I will tell y'all, have a good one, and thank you so much again for watching. Alright. Comfy, Bubba. Hop down, Bubba. Good boy.